Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a powerful question to begin. What happens when the quiet systems behind money start to shake, when the giants are forced to move and the rules of the game are suddenly exposed? Today's headline is not just news. It is a signal that the financial battlefield is alive, shifting, and revealing truths that only the prepared are ready to see. But the forced delivery of 3 million ounces by Deutsche Bank is not a routine settlement. It is a moment that commands attention because forced action in financial systems rarely happens without deeper pressure behind it. When a major global bank is compelled to deliver physical assets rather than roll contracts forward, delay obligations, or settle on paper, it signals that flexibility has narrowed. This is where headlines stop being noise and start becoming evidence. Markets are built on confidence, but confidence is tested when promises must suddenly turn into metal, weight, and verified supply. What makes this development striking is not just the volume itself, but the fact that delivery was unavoidable. 3 million ounces represents a substantial physical commitment, one that cannot be masked by accounting language or derivative structures. When delivery is forced, it means the usual levers, extensions, offsets, internal transfers are no longer sufficient. That alone should make observers pause, because systems under comfort do not force outcomes. Systems under strain do. This is how pressure quietly reveals itself before it becomes widely acknowledged. There is also a psychological shift embedded in this event. Markets thrive on the assumption that obligations can always be managed, deferred, or absorbed. Forced delivery disrupts that assumption. It introduces a new variable, accountability in real form. Physical assets do not negotiate. They must exist, they must be sourced, and they must be delivered. When a major institution is pushed to that point, this moment also reframes risk perception. For years, many participants have operated under the belief that large institutions are insulated from hard constraints. Forced delivery challenges that belief. It demonstrates that size does not equal immunity, and reputation does not replace inventory. That realization alone changes behavior, not just for banks, but for funds, counterparties, and informed observers watching how quickly conditions can shift. The real hook lies here. Moments like this do not happen at the peak of comfort, they happen at the edge of tolerance. When systems begin demanding fulfillment rather than promises, it suggests that underlying dynamics are tightening. For those paying attention, this is not just a data point. It is a signal that the balance between obligation and availability is being tested, and that the market is quietly asking a question it can no longer ignore. What happens when delivery becomes non-negotiable? JPMorgan's capture of roughly 80% of the available position is more than a headline about market share. It is a statement of power, timing, and strategic intent. When one institution absorbs such a dominant portion of supply, it is not reacting emotionally, it is positioning deliberately. This kind of concentration does not occur by accident, and it rarely happens without foresight into shifting conditions. The question that naturally follows is not what JPMorgan acquired, but why now? Control at this scale reshapes the landscape. So by consolidating such a large percentage, JPMorgan effectively reduces optionality for other participants while increasing its own leverage across pricing, liquidity, and delivery influence. This is how dominance quietly forms, not through loud announcements, but through decisive accumulation when others are constrained or forced to act. In moments of institutional stress, the strongest players do not retreat, they advance. That contrast is where real insight lives. There is also a deeper signal embedded in this move. Institutions with the most advanced risk models and access to market intelligence do not commit capital blindly. An 80% grab suggests confidence that the assets secured today will matter more tomorrow. It implies anticipation of tighter supply, of structural change, or of a market that may soon reward possession over promises. When a leading bank chooses ownership instead of exposure, it tells a story that numbers alone cannot explain. This level of consolidation also alters behavior downstream. Smaller institutions, funds, and counterparties must now operate in an environment where supply influence is less distributed. That shift creates tension, and tension reshapes markets. Pricing mechanisms, delivery expectations, and negotiation power all begin to tilt toward the entity holding the majority stake. This is not theory. It is how control manifests when availability becomes strategic rather than abundant. The hook here is subtle but powerful. Dominance is rarely visible until it is already established. By the time headlines appear, the real positioning has already occurred. JPMorgan's move signals preparedness, not panic. It reflects an understanding that when others are forced into delivery or retreat, opportunity concentrates in the hands of those ready to absorb it. Markets reward those who move, while others hesitate. For informed observers, this is a reminder that institutional strength is not just measured by balance sheets, but by timing. Acquiring 80% in a pressured environment is not defense, it is assertion. And when assertion meets scarcity, influence follows. The market may interpret this as consolidation, but beneath the surface, it reads as confidence that control today shapes outcomes tomorrow. Not. Institutional stress rarely announces itself openly, it leaks through behavior, timing, and necessity. What makes the current environment remarkable is that stress is no longer hidden behind quarterly reports or carefully worded statements. It is unfolding in real time. Forced settlements are pulling back the curtain on systems that have long relied on paper efficiency rather than physical certainty. When contracts that once rolled endlessly are suddenly challenged by demands for actual delivery, the gap between representation and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Paper-based systems are designed for speed, scale, and flexibility, but they depend on one fragile assumption, that not everyone will ask for fulfillment at the same time. As long as confidence holds, the structure appears stable. The moment physical demand rises and participants insist on settlement rather than substitution, that assumption is tested. This is where institutional stress becomes visible, not through collapse, but through friction. Delays, forced actions, and rapid repositioning are all symptoms of a system adjusting under pressure. The real hook is this: stress is not a failure signal, it is a truth signal. When institutions are pushed into honoring obligations in physical form, it reveals how much of the system was built on expectation rather than inventory. Contracts were never meant to be questioned as directly, and yet here we are, watching paper promises encounter real-world limits. That confrontation changes everything, because it redefines risk from a theoretical calculation into a tangible constraint. This exposure also reshapes trust. Counterparties begin reassessing not just pricing, but reliability. When settlement terms move from abstract to enforced, the market stops assuming and starts verifying. That shift forces institutions to prioritize resilience over convenience, coverage over leverage. What makes this moment especially compelling is its timing. Institutional stress is being revealed not during a sudden crash, but during control pressure. That is often the most telling phase because it shows how systems behave before panic sets in. Observers who understand this recognize that early stress indicators are more valuable than late-stage breakdowns. They reveal where the structure bends. Long before it breaks, the deeper implication is unavoidable. Physical demand is reclaiming authority. When reality challenges representation, the system must adapt. And adaptation is never neutral. It redistributes power, exposes weakness, and rewards preparation. Watching institutional stress unfold in real time is not just witnessing tension, it is witnessing the market recalibrate its relationship with truth. The temporary sidelining of retail investors is not a story of disappearance, but of displacement caused by scale and timing. When large institutions move aggressively to absorb supply, access naturally tightens, and smaller participants feel the impact first. This is not personal, and it is not accidental. It is structural. Markets are designed to prioritize size during moments of stress, and when availability shrinks, influence consolidates. Retail investors, often referred to as eagles for their long-term vision, are not grounded because they are wrong, but because airspace has become crowded with heavier machinery. What makes this moment compelling is the contrast between visibility and power. Retail investors see the headlines, feel the restrictions, and experience the sudden lack of access, while institutional players operate quietly behind the scenes. This imbalance can feel discouraging, but it also reveals a critical truth. Markets do not reward urgency, they reward positioning. When supply is absorbed at the top, it forces patience at the base. That patience, though uncomfortable, has historically separated reactive participants from resilient ones. The hook lies in understanding that being sidelined does not mean being eliminated. Eagles do not fight in storms, they rise above them. Retail participants are temporarily constrained because institutions are prioritizing control, not because the retail thesis has vanished. In fact, scarcity-driven sidelining often validates the very demand that retail investors recognized early. When access becomes difficult, it is rarely because something has lost value. It is because value is being contested. There's also a psychological dimension at play. Moments like these are designed, intentionally or not, to test conviction. Reduced availability, higher barriers, and increased dominance by large players can shake confidence and provoke impulsive decisions. This is where discipline becomes the differentiator. Retail investors who understand cycles know that forced patience is not weakness, it is preparation. The market often removes participation just before clarity emerges. What unfolds next is always shaped by awareness. Retail investors who stay informed, grounded, and unemotional maintain their advantage even when activity pauses. Being temporarily sidelined offers something institutions cannot buy: perspective. While large players compete for control, retail participants retain the freedom to observe without pressure to act. That observation sharpens strategy. The most important insight is this: sidelining is a phase, not a verdict. Markets move in waves, and access always returns once concentration reaches its limit. When that happens, those who waited with understanding, not frustration, are positioned to re-enter with strength, clarity, and renewed altitude. Dara's rising pressure has a unique effect on markets. It removes the luxury of opacity. When conditions are calm, leverage can stay hidden, obligations can be abstract, and risk can be diluted across layers of complexity under pressure. However, those layers begin to thin. Physical delivery requirements force clarity where assumptions once lived. What was previously implied must now be demonstrated, and that shift is how transparency quietly but decisively enters the system. This is where accountability changes form. Numbers on a screen can be adjusted, extended, or netted out, but physical settlement has no such flexibility. It either happens or it doesn't. When delivery becomes mandatory, every participant is exposed to the same standard of truth. Inventory must exist, chains of custody must be verifiable, and commitments must be honored without interpretation. That environment does something powerful. It aligns perception with reality. The hook is simple but unsettling. Transparency is rarely voluntary. It emerges when pressure removes alternatives. As markets tighten, participants can no longer rely on reputation alone. They must rely on proof. This dynamic alters behavior across the system. Institutions reassess exposure, counterparties reassess trust, and risk models are forced to confront conditions they were not optimized to handle. What follows is not chaos, but recalibration. Increased transparency also redistributes confidence. Those who can meet delivery requirements gain credibility, while those who cannot are quietly repositioned. This process is subtle but irreversible. Once accountability becomes visible, it cannot be unseen. Market participants begin to differentiate between theoretical strength and operational strength, and that distinction matters far more under pressure than during expansion. There is also a strategic consequence. Transparency compresses time. Issues that might have taken years to surface are revealed in weeks or even days. This accelerates decision-making and rewards preparedness. Institutions that anticipated tighter conditions move smoothly. While those reliant on flexibility face friction, the market, in turn, becomes less forgiving of excess and more respectful of discipline. Perhaps the most important shift is psychological. Transparency changes expectations. When participants know that delivery may be required, behavior adjusts upstream. Leverage is reduced, promises are measured more carefully, and risk tolerance contracts. This does not weaken the market. It strengthens it by aligning it more closely with reality. Pressure, then, is not merely a stressor. It is a clarifier. By forcing transparency, it transforms hidden structures into visible frameworks. And once accountability is visible, the market begins operating on a higher standard, one where trust is earned through action, not assumption. But volatility has a way of unsettling those who look at markets only on the surface. Yet for those who understand structure, it serves a very different purpose. When institutions reposition and long-standing patterns begin to shift, volatility is not randomness, it is information. Strategic opportunity does not emerge in moments of comfort. It reveals itself when pressure forces movement. This is the environment where insight gains value and preparation turns into advantage. As major players adjust their positions, the market begins to expose its underlying mechanics. Liquidity changes, access tightens, and behavior becomes more intentional. These transitions are rarely smooth, but they are deeply instructive. Every forced decision, every consolidation of control, and every moment of constraint provides signals to those willing to observe rather than react. The hook lies in recognizing that opportunity is not created by movement alone, but by understanding why the movement is happening. In volatile conditions, the uninformed chase outcomes, while informed participants study causes. This distinction matters when institutions move capital, secure supply, or reduce exposure. They are responding to conditions that may not yet be obvious to the broader market. Those who can interpret these actions gain early insight into where value may shift next. Volatility becomes a lens, not a threat. There is also a mindset component that defines who benefits. Strategic opportunity favors patience, discipline, and clarity. It rewards those who resist emotional decision-making and instead focus on alignment with long-term structure. Markets often test conviction before confirming direction, and volatility is the test. Those who mistake noise for danger often exit prematurely, while those who recognize transition remain positioned. Another critical element is adaptability. Opportunity during repositioning does not look the same as opportunity during expansion. It requires flexibility in thinking, not impulsiveness in action. The market is recalibrating, and recalibration always produces inefficiencies. These inefficiencies are where informed participants find leverage, not through speed, but through understanding. The most powerful insight is this: volatility compresses learning. Years of gradual change are condensed into short windows of visibility. For those paying attention, this creates a rare chance to align strategy with emerging reality rather than outdated assumptions. Strategic opportunity is not reserved for the largest players. It belongs to the most prepared ones. In times of institutional adjustment, the future quietly takes shape. Those who study the present with discipline and awareness are not guessing at what comes next. They are positioning for it